Okay, tell us some of the folklore of the window.
Drive the highway down the moon, past the billboard where you see me, see me, ask the people for their king.
Welcome back to the Silver Nitrate Witches Movie Review Brew, the podcast where we talk about how we talk about movies. And we are your Silver Nitrate Witches. My name's Isabelle. I'm a writer, academic editor, and tarot reader.
And I'm Laura Valenza. I'm co-film editor at the Brooklyn Rail, and I've given a TEDx talk on gender and film criticism, which is available on YouTube. I'm currently at work on a novel inspired by my love for movies, and today I am the Wicked Witch of East 156th Street.
I love it. Is that in the Bronx? Is that the joke?
I think it is in the Bronx, but there was an East 156th Street sign.
Oh, I just was assuming because at some point in my notes about this movie, I said, so if the BMW guy is from Manhattan, where is their neighborhood supposed to be? And then like a few minutes later, they mentioned the Bronx, and I was like, the Bronx. Got it.
We are talking about the 2000 movie Finding Forrester, which was directed by Gus Van Sant, who you might know from the very similarly themed movie Good Will Hunting, Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, or My Own Private Idaho. It was written by Mike Rich, who apparently wrote this movie while working at a radio station in Oregon, and he actually won a Nickel Fellowship for it in 1998 for the script, which is basically like the biggest screenwriter, like for somebody who's new to screenwriting and trying to break in, like winning the Nickel Fellowship, it's like
a big deal.
It's a big deal. It's given out by the Academy and, really says that you have a real shot at a career. So that's a big deal. It's rated PG-13, and it's a pretty hefty movie running at 2 hours and 16 minutes. All right, so what happens in Finding Forrester? So our protagonist, Jamal Wallace, is 16 and lives in the Bronx with his mom. Jamal is played by Rob Brown, who seems like a totally underrated actor. He really carries this movie, and
He's incredible. This was his first movie, too.
Yes, and we're going to get into more casting details soon, but I didn't recognize much of like what he's done since then, which I was sort of sad about. I did notice, though, that he was in an HBO show called Treme, New Orleans shout out.
Yeah, it seems like he's still, plugging away and working, which is always great. It's always a disappointment to see like somebody that you think is like so shining and excellent in a movie that's like 20 years old has not continued, but God, he's wonderful, and I'm so glad he's still out there doing stuff, and I should see Treme now. I'm curious.
So his dad, who was struggling with addiction, left. His older brother seems to live nearby but no longer lives with them. His older brother is Terrell, and played by Busta Rhymes.
Yes!
He works in the parking lot at Yankee Stadium and is also working on his rap music on the side. Jamal seems like a pretty average teenage boy. He loves the Yankees. He doesn't want to get up for school. He gets C grades at his public high school. He likes playing basketball with his friends. They do dares, like sneaking into the apartment of the Window, the mysterious man who watches the boys' basketball games through his top floor window. But the truth about Jamal's intelligence and talent soon comes out in this movie. His mom is called into the school for a meeting with his English teacher, who tells her that Jamal scored off the charts on his standardized tests, and this means that private schools might be interested in him. And while this is all happening, we also have more developments with the Window. So Jamal did that dare where he broke into the Window's apartment, and the Window, it turns out, wasn't sleeping. Dude was there. And Jamal got so scared he left his backpack behind. There's a really funny moment where you see the backpack hung up in the guy's window.
He's like, I got your stuff. What are you going to do?
And he eventually throws it to the ground from this top story window. And this is kind of like a big pivotal moment because Jamal, who loves to write, finds out that the window read his journals and with red pen made notes on his writing. And anyone who is a writer knows that it's a huge compliment for another writer to actually feel you are worthy of the red pen. Like, you don't waste time giving notes to someone who is not talented.
So many good notes, too. I remember thinking, like, this is some real professory, like, thoughtful, like, notes. Where are you taking me? At the end of one of the notebooks, I was like, ooh, I love this.
Yes. And we're going to talk about that line, too, more in a little bit, because I think that kind of fits in well with some of the themes that are built in this movie. So, and they're like, also, I mean, they are really good comments on writing, but they're also like so poetic. Like, I kind of feel like you could take all of his red notes and turn them into a poem. Anyway, Jamal ends up getting to know the Window more, and the Window is actually famed one-hit wonder novelist / recluse William Forrester, who is played by Sean Connery and his Scottish accent. And Jamal ends up going to him for more writing guidance and inspiration. And meanwhile, he also gets a scholarship to a private school on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where things are culturally very different from his public school. So some good and some bad things happen at the hoity-toity high. Jamal meets the pretty, smart, and kind Claire, who's played by Anna Paquin, who's in True Blood.
That's okay. My note literally I have, that's the chick from True Blood.
But she also won an Oscar for a movie called The Piano when she was 11.
Oh, wow. She won the Oscar?
Yeah, it was like, I think it was Best Supporting Actress.
Holy shit.
Now that he's at this new school, he's actually feeling pretty motivated to try harder than getting C's. But the downside is the school is actually like really invested in his ability to make their basketball team win. And his vindictive English teacher, Robert Crawford, is, well, a vindictive asshole. Yeah, he sucks. Forrester, I think, describes Crawford really well at one point. He says, bitterly disappointed teachers can either be very effective or very dangerous. And we know that Crawford is going to end up being very dangerous. So Crawford is played by F. Murray Abram. Excuse me, that's actually F. Murray Abraham, who is also bitter about not being good enough in the face of genius in Amadeus as the composer and...
Oh, shit!
Yeah, the composer and the rival to Mozart, Antonio Salieri.
I thought he looked familiar, but like he didn't look familiar enough for me to like want to investigate who he was. Oh my god, that's hilarious.
He's an incredible actor and very good at this type of role, so...
Very good at being second fiddle. Bless him.
Kind of literally in Amadeus.
Amadeus.
So Crawford accuses Jamal of plagiarizing his work because he just can't believe that this talented basketball player from the Bronx actually is this good of a writer. And he subjects him to some utterly humiliating situations, even though Jamal continues to outsmart him. And ultimately, Crawford finds out that Jamal used the title and first paragraph of a New Yorker essay by Forrester for his paper for the big writing competition that's the climax of this movie. But the rest of the paper really is Jamal's work, and the exercise to use the beginning of it was actually given to him by Forrester himself. But Jamal promised that he would not tell anybody that he knows Forrester, and... let the man have his piece.
He also promised that whatever is written in Forrester's apartment stays in Forrester's apartment, and he broke that rule.
There was a bit of a moment of desperation, I think, provoked by Crawford's accusations, where Jamal removed the paper, and as Jamal points out later on to Forrester, why didn't he just tell him the exercise came from a published article?
Yeah. And by the way, it was published in the New Yorker. That was a surprisingly enjoyable altercation between the two of them.
It was. It's a very dramatic movie, but there's a lot of very humorous moments in it. This creates this whole problem of, Jamal is about to get kicked out of this school, and Forrester does not want to leave his apartment. But ultimately, Forrester does brave the outside world to come to school to read a letter that awes teachers and students alike, only to reveal that this essay was actually written by Jamal, thereby vindicating him and making Crawford look like an ass, which is very satisfying. Forrester ultimately decides to return to Scotland and embrace being outside once again, and when he dies a year later, he leaves his apartment to Jamal, as well as an unpublished novel with instructions for Jamal to add a foreword.
Can I walk you through the emotional ups and downs I went through in the last 10 minutes of watching this movie via my notes? Okay.
Yes.
Oh shit, that's Matt Damon, because Matt Damon is the lawyer who comes to give Jamal the news. Next bullet, all caps, no. Next bullet, all caps, oh no, he's a lawyer, no. The next bullet, no. Next bullet, oh my gosh, all those books in the apartment, that's so nice. And then the last bullet, he wrote a second book. And then the emoji of the crying face. And I was legitimately crying at that point.
I love it. Yes.
It may be important to know that William Forrester, the character, is, I suppose, agoraphobic. I don't know if there's an official diagnosis or whatever in the movie, but he rarely leaves his apartment.
Maybe
and
rather than trying to use a diagnosis, he's experienced a lot of grief in a very short period of time and feels very betrayed by the world, and he just doesn't want to go outside anymore.
He doesn't really leave his place, and so that becomes a plot point later on. I did also, though, when I felt like I had really called some shit, because at some point early in the movie when they start passing out his book to Jamal's class at the beginning, and they were like, he only wrote the one novel, and that's what we're going to read. I went, oh my gosh, watch that be the guy in the window, right? And then it happened, and I was like, oh my god, I called it! And then immediately was like, no, I didn't. That's the name of the movie, you dumbass. Everybody called that. Everybody watching this movie called that. You're not special. So I had a real, move, yeah. It was great.
It is a great moment, though, when he flips to the back and sees, young Forrester's
gorgeous Sean
picture, and
Connery.
it's yes, beautiful Sean Connery. Oh, R.I.P. Sean Connery.
Mm-hmm. What a good accent.
He was a great actor and a great accent. So I'm just actually, before I move on to what's next, I really tried to focus on just a few reviews from some really big national publications this time around. So I'm just going to kind of give a quick rundown of whose reviews are going to be peppered through our conversation.
Here's your table of contents, listeners.
Table of contents. Pay attention. Memorize it. All right, so we have a Finding Forrester review by Roger Ebert from 2000.
Oh, friend of the pod, Roger.
We have Finding Forrester, creatively titled, by Peter Travers in Rolling Stone from December 20th, 2000. So this was kind of like a Christmas movie.
Oh, I can picture enjoying going to see this in the theaters at Christmas time with my sister or my mom or something. Yeah.
We do have a Variety article by Thomas J. McLean that talks about how he thinks this movie is probably going to go over big at the Oscars. It already has so many Oscar winners or nominees in it. So I didn't really quote that movie or that review in here, but it did have some helpful information. But one of his suspicions was that this was the type of kind of holiday time movie that the Academy might look very kindly upon during Oscar season. Then we also have another Variety article called Sony logs Forrester, Damon's role applauded, Connery slippery at Pix Preem by Abby Tushin for Variety on December 4th, 2000.
That's, to quote you, back to you, that's a sentence.
I'm not sure that is a sentence or if that's a series of nonsensical phrases.
It's a lot.
It might be a poem.
Can you read it? My brain just went, that's too many words about halfway through, and I could not listen to the rest. Can you do it one more time for me?
Sony logs Forrester, Damon's role applauded, Connery slippery at Pix Priam.
Matt Damon's in this movie for like all of 4 seconds.
Yeah, I know. And then we also have Miles Smiles on Forrester, Jazz for Tale of Opposites, Common Ground by David Mermelstein, writing in Variety in January 17th, 2001. And then we do have 2 New York Times articles, but they're in the timeout corner right now, and we'll get to them later, okay?
I love when you get mad at the articles.
Yeah, well, we have a returning nemesis this episode.
Oh,
Belle.
Yay. Oh,
I always find an enemy.
I probably know. I don't remember how to say his name, but I think I know who you're talking about. But yay, I'm excited to see. Okay.
Oh, no. New guy. We have a new nemesis.
Oh, you said returning nemesis, I thought.
Well, he was in last week's episode by myself.
Oh, okay. Because I know there's somebody else from the New York Times that we don't care.
No, we have a new one we don't care
Okay,
for.
well, they're in the timeout corner, and we will get to them when we get to them.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And we will not end on them.
Good.
We will penultimately talk about them, but we will not end on them.
Good. All right.
All right. So speaking of that really wordy Variety article by Tushin.
The one about Matt Damon.
Yeah. She writes that Sony's Priam, which I'm guessing is an abbreviation for premiere. She really likes her abbreviations. She says Sony's Priam of Finding Forrester Friday night turned into a futile search for Pix star Sean Connery, who quietly slipped away in the minutes between the screening and dessert reception at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in Bev Hills, which I just thought that was kind of she doesn't say any more about that, but I just love knowing that Connery is like, I watched it and I'm out.
Yeah. Bye.
I think if I was at that point in my career, I'd probably feel the same.
Yeah, I think it's impressive he stayed for the whole screening and didn't leave after the red carpet, which I'm sure some people do.
And then she does also talk about the, quote, decision to give Matt Damon a cameo in the pick, which, she says, by the way, elicited the biggest audience response all evening. I'm like, really?
Is she? I'm so confused. It sounds like she's trying to shit on this movie. Like, the only good thing about this was Matt Damon.
I know, it's kind of weird. But she did also get a quote from Gus Van Sant about the choice to put Damon in a cameo that I thought was really nice. He said, it's interesting metaphorically because he had such goodwill with Good Will Hunting. And he's like sliding the keys over to Rob Brown, and there's sort of a connection there between the two leads.
I like that.
I like that too.
It's like a passing of the torch.
I know. It makes me kind of sad though, because clearly like Van Sant, who is already a very established and respected director at this time, was trying to give this young unknown actor a real leg up. And so I think it's kind of a bummer that he hasn't done anything that's gotten this level of attention. And in some ways, this movie has also been very forgotten too.
I had never heard of it until you mentioned it to me. And then when I rented it on Prime to watch, my mother and I share a Prime. And so every time I rent a movie for the podcast, I'm like, I rented this, don't watch it yet. And then when I watch it, I'm like, okay, if you want to watch it, you can. And she'll usually ask or something, you know, like what movie, and I mentioned what it was, and she's like, oh yeah, I heard of that. It's got Sean Connery. It's supposed to be good. And I was like, great. I have literally no idea what I'm in for.
Yeah, I saw somebody and made a YouTube video more recently kind of paying tribute to this movie and being like Hollywood's forgotten classic or whatever, which I do think is accurate. Mm-hmm. I also want to say, you know, Roger Ebert had this really nice line about how Brown is this debut actor, and then we have Connery, who's so well known for so many other things. And Ebert wrote, it's a pleasure to watch the rapport between Connery in his 50th year of acting and Brown in his first role.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And they have a real rapport in this movie. Mm-hmm. It is really charming.
They ask a lot of good soup questions.
Yes. And I thought too, like Dead Poets Society, that was nice, like how much like this young student ended up carrying so much of the movie. But then we also have the joy of this older, more established actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, and I think while we're talking about casting too, going back to your pal Busta Rhymes, which I know you were really excited about.
It was just so funny because you told me he was in it, and I forgot, and he's so young because I always think of Busta Rhymes like now, not like 20 years ago, and I didn't recognize him at first, and then he started talking, and I went, oh shit, that is Busta Rhymes! Like, he's just got such an iconic that sort of gravelly tone in the back of his voice. It's like, you can't unhear it.
No, he has like a really good, like, it's a very satisfying voice.
Yes. Even when he's rapping, it's amazing. But like, even just to hear him talk, it's very satisfying. Yeah, he's got a good voice.
Also, he's like a really good big brother in this movie.
Yeah. I would watch Busta Rhymes in so many more movies.
Well, and I thought it was kind of, it's kind of a funny thing that it's like, oh, Busta Rhymes is actually in this movie. But I think it's actually such a great casting moment because there's that wonderful dinner scene with the mom and Jamal and Terrell, the brother. And Terrell is they're all like really proud of Jamal for getting into this fancy new school. But Terrell is kind of like saying that he's good with his parking lot attendant job. And he's got his music that he's working on the side. And he's really building his rap career. And I feel like there's a version of that scene where you could kind of take it as like, sure, Terrell, okay, you've got your music you're working on. But I think the smart thing about casting Busta Rhymes in that role is that it's like, well, it's Busta Rhymes. So, like, yeah, he's got his music good to work on the side. Like, of course it's going somewhere. And it kind of feels like this moment of, like, look at these, like, this family with all this talent running through it.
Yeah.
So I think that was like a really kind of clever thing to do with the casting there.
I agree. I like that a lot.
Okay. And now going back to the scene that Belle referenced, if you want to talk about that a little bit more, Peter Travers, who was writing for Rolling Stone, talked about how he thought one of the biggest strengths of this movie actually kind of comes from that scene. So he wrote, Finding Forrester speaks softly but carries a big surprise. Sean Connery shows fear. After 5 decades as a macho legend, from James Bond to Entrapment, Connery, 70, triumphs by lowering his guard.
Yes, I was moved and also struck with fear at that scene because like I think this is the sort of like I don't mean to say it's a bad trope, but it is like, you could it's like the Chekhov's gun. It's Chekhov's shut-in. There's a shut-in at the beginning of the movie who makes a young friend. Eventually the young friend is going to find a way to bring him out of the house and have him enjoy some of the world, right? So I anticipated that scene was coming. And when they got out of the apartment fairly easily, I was like, oh, that's nice. And then I was like, oh no, that means something far worse is going to happen. And so I could feel, I'm sorry if you can hear the cat. Hello? I could feel the panic attack coming from like a mile away as soon as they get into the stadium. And the Did you hear that? Hello. Great, look at him just
Yeah, he's very ominously sitting behind you.
Oh, he's got some zoomies. Watch.
Oh.
Are you gonna be okay, buddy? Can I finish my sentence? Okay, I'm gonna try. I think the whole scene, in addition to like just Connery in that moment, is done really well because the sound like ekes up like little by little. So like you can hear suddenly louder and louder.
Wait, it ekes up, but only when when they get separated. It's only Connery. When it's Jamal, it kind of just feels like we're having fun in a big happening place.
It's just normal background noise, and then when they get separated and Forrester is by himself, the sound gets louder suddenly, and you can like hear like the breathing and his heartbeat as well as the sound of the crowd. I had to turn the sound on my TV down because I was like, this is going to give me a panic attack. And it's especially something with breathing for me. If there's like difficult breathing or shortness of breath or like people holding their breath in movies or TV, I have to sit there and physically make myself breathe, and I was having to do anyway. So the scene was really well done. I hate to be like, it gave me a panic attack. It was so well done, but like it got me there. It was really well done.
And then it's really heartbreaking when he finally finds like the closet where he can get away from everybody, and he's like on there's a point too where the crowd gets so thick he trips, and it's really heartbreaking.
It's so sad. And then you can when Jamal does finally find him again, and he's like, let's get out of here. Like, there's no kind of negotiation or like, do you want to try to go to the game or anything? Just like, let's get you out of here. And it's just a moment of, I think, really beautiful understanding between the two of them.
Yeah, and I think what's also really great is this is obviously a story about two very different people from very different walks of life finding connection, and that scene is such a perfect metaphor for trying to find connection, because, you know, you cut between Forrester, who's, you know, lost and he doesn't know where Jamal is, but he's also like so stuck in his own head that he's shutting himself off from everybody around him and so lonely even in this crowd of people. And then you see Jamal's fear as he's trying to find him and he's worried for him. And so it's such a perfect metaphor for the connection that is happening across this whole movie. And then of course it sets up the gorgeous Yankee Stadium scene where Terrell sneaks them onto the field at Yankee Stadium, which is Jamal's surprise for Forrester, because he knows that he used to go to the Yankees games and that he loves the Yankees, and that's the first time that Forrester actually opens up about the trauma he's experienced in his life and the moment that made him stop writing. And I love that, and this is getting into what I want to talk about next, which are like themes and motifs of this movie, but I love that they have to leave the apartment and go outside in order for Forrester to finally let Jamal in.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
And I also think, too, that Travers' point about we have this actor who cultivated this, you know, very masculine persona for himself over the decades. I also think that's really interesting in this movie because for so long now, you know, getting young boys to read has been such a problem in this country. So I think it's really cool that we have this actor who's kind of playing against the type that he normally played, and that we also have a young boy who's discovering his talent for writing, and that these two men are bonding over writing, and also how you can use books to get girls.
I love all of the silly conversations about books. Like there's one first, I think I just love all of the little like neurotic tendencies Forrester has about his books. Like Jamal will put a book on the shelf and like multiple times you'll see them in mid-conversation and Forrester will reach his arm over and slide the book so like it actually fits flush to the shelf with the others. Or there's one part I love when Jamal is looking at the books and Forrester's typing and you can hear the typing really fast and steady, and then Jamal puts a book back, but it's not quite put back yet, and the typing stops. And then Jamal like hears the typing stop and he looks up and he pushes the book back onto the shelf, and then Forrester keeps typing. No, but I was gonna say I love the conversations they have about books, like when Jamal's like, when people used to read your book, and Forrester's like, used to? You want to bet on that, motherfucker? And then when he's like, have you read all of these books? And Forrester says, no, they're just to impress my guests when they come by, because of course he has no guests ever. Or one of my favorite things he said was, when he says, you know, we're talking about your book in school, and Forrester says, people have been talking about it for years, they just haven't been saying anything. So they just have such good literature conversations and such nice shared moments of writing and reading. It's so nice.
They do. And the first in my list of themes and motifs is writing and literature, including how to cultivate talent and genius. And then I would also, I definitely want to dig into these more, but just to kind of like go through what I think the main like themes and motifs are. There's also family and friendship, particularly in how it spans a generational and life experience gap. Race and class dynamic, huge part of this movie. Comparisons to, there's like a lot of like comparisons to Good Will Hunting, like critics have referred to the academic underdog or closeted genius themes that are sort of similar across the two movies and across Robin Williams and Sean Connery's roles and Matt Damon's and Rob Brown's roles. Before we like go deeper into themes or motifs, are there any others you would like to add to the list? There are birds. You know,
there are birds. There are birds. I had so many notes that I was like, Sean Connery, you're getting real creepy with these binoculars with this camera. And then I was like, oh, it's because he's bird watching. That's less creepy, I suppose.
It's just only creepy when you don't know what he's doing.
No, I think you hit all the motifs on the head. I can't think of any others.
Well, actually, the binoculars are a perfect segue into digging deeper into themes and motifs.
Perfect.
So I wanted to start...
Let's put it on our binoculars and take a closer look.
Oh my God. Let's do that. Let's get our camcorders and record that so we can publish a podcast. So anyway, I want to talk specifically about the setup of the movie, and then we can kind of go from there, because I actually think like so many of like the main themes of the movie are set up really beautifully in the beginning of the film. I mean, first of all, like the Bronx neighborhood and...
Oh, do you mean like the opening shot with the kid
like
rapping?
that opening montage, I think is like really important to setting up the themes. I mean, first of all, it kind of gives you all the shots of the Bronx and the people of the Bronx and sets up, you know, this setting that we're entering in. But I also love that it starts with a Finding Forrester clapperboard.
Yeah, I thought this was a documentary for a hot second. I was like, what did I sign up for?
Yeah, and I feel like that really emphasizes this idea of the gaze and watching, and how the gaze and watching connect to this like private versus public life, or interiority versus exteriority. And then we have like this really interesting montage that cuts between people around the Bronx who are often kind of gazing into the middle distance, and there's this real sense, or to me, I'm curious if you kind of like how that beginning made you feel, but to me there was this real sense of looking for something. And that's why, and I saw that really echoed when later we have, you know, Forrester write, "Where are you taking me?" There's this sense of searching. Yeah. And then I think Forrester also asked Jamal at one point, "What is it you wish to do with your life?" So I felt like we really set that up right from the opening montage.
That opening montage I kept thinking a lot of Patricia Smith's poem. She writes and publishes like written poems obviously as well, but like in the 90s she was quite popular doing like spoken word and like slam poetry, and she has one called The Undertaker that you can look up like a video of her performing this, and it's actually done like a music video kind of thing. It's actually like directed and stylized and everything.
I thought the other thing that's interesting is that the shots of the people are cut with shots of apartment buildings, which I thought really emphasized, again, the private versus public life, what people see and what they don't see. And speaking of what people see and what they don't see, we already talked about how Jamal kind of is working on this one persona at school, but it's not, you know, necessarily his interior life. And I love that our very first introduction to Jamal is not him, but the stack of books next to his bed. And I just like, the titles tell you so much about this kid, like right away. I mean, there's so many Penguin classics in there, so you can tell he's like trying to hit like all the classics. There are 2 James Joyces. There's a Ken Kesey. There's a Marquis de Sade.
I saw that! And I was like, oh, Laura's gonna like that one.
That's a little edgy for a 16-year-old, but good for you, Jamal.
I wrote, oh god, that stack of books feels like undergrad.
It does. And then I also love that I think it was the top book in the shelf was Fool for Love, which is a play by Sam Shepard, who we adore as the veterinarian in Baby Boom.
Yeah, he's back.
Yeah, also R.I.P. Oh, the creepy cat is back.
Oh, he's coming in. Hello. Oh, that was crispy.
Yeah. But I also think that it's also like a fun contrast between like we have, you know, the classics like Penguin classics and the 2 Joyces and stuff. But then I love too that like, you know, we're throwing in Sade, we're throwing in Kesey. I like that you can see that on the spine that Shepard's play was published by City Lights, and City Lights is a really old bookstore in San Francisco.
Yeah, I've been there. I was like, why does that sound familiar? Yeah.
And I've never been there, but I have a postcard of a famous poster that Lawrence Ferlinghetti made for them that says "Books Not Bombs."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like, it's cool how all of these books like can tell you so much about this character right away. And then Roger Ebert pointed out the most wonderful detail about this stack of books. So he writes, all of the books are battered except one, the paperback of James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, which looks brand new and has no creases on its spine. That's the book everybody buys, but nobody reads.
Oh, what a great detail.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I love that.
Yeah. So then, of course, this whole like idea of the gaze and the barrier between public and private life is like completely embodied in the the window, which is the nickname the boys all give Sean Connery's character before we meet him. And can I just say, I love the conceit of the shut-in who has all these mysterious like folklore and legends surrounding him.
Can we talk about the story they tell at the lunch table about him?
Yes.
Oh my god.
Okay, tell us some of the folklore of the window.
There's the usual things where they're like, he murdered somebody or whatever. I forget other things going on, but my favorite story that is told at the lunch table about the window is one kid starts telling this story, and like they've just come from English class, I feel like it's important to note, talking about The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Okay, they get to the lunch.
Wait, I'm sorry. And their English teacher has the best description of The Raven I've ever heard, and that was, I wrote it down. Oh, that Poe wrote it while he was, quote, strung out on cocaine and obsessed with death.
Yes, I liked their English teacher. She's cool. Way better than the fucking Robert Crawford guy. Anyway.
I know.
So they just
This is why public school should have proper funding everywhere and people shouldn't have to go to private school.
Agreed.
Anyway,
agreed, but yes. So, yeah, they just come from this class talking about Edgar Allan Poe and the Raven and all this creepy stuff. And he starts telling this story of this girl. I forget her name, but they're like, he's like, you guys remember this girl? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, well, she lived in that building. And she said one night she heard this tapping coming from the apartment above her. And that's where the window lives, right? And then it starts moving around the apartment building, and then suddenly she starts hearing it come from underneath her. So she starts moving around her apartment and following the tapping noise, and then she realizes that it's the sound of a knife tapping, and it's tapping on her front door, and she opens the door, and it's the window guy, and that's why we've never seen her again. And then the other kids are like, are you talking about the girl who lives like literally across the street from you? And call total bullshit on his story. But I'm listening just like in awe to this kid tell the story, and I'm like, you're telling this story and you couldn't get into The Raven? Has anyone ever showed this kid The Telltale Heart? That would get him into the English lesson real quick. Are you kidding me?
That was the first thought I had too, is I was like, is he just telling them The Telltale Heart but the window edition? Yeah.
That was another thought, is like, what if, is that the one they talked about before, The Raven, and he's just like subbing in some things? Either way, I thought it was a great moment coming from talking about Poe to doing that story with the tapping.
Totally. And there's also a great, classic, like, oh, the shut-in is watching moment when the boys are on the court and one of them says, you ever seen him? And the other one goes, nah, but he sees us.
Yes. I'm curious too. I do know that we get, I think, early in the movie, some shots like focalized through the binoculars of him watching the basketball game. But because later on we get to see that he's actually like looking at birds, I have to wonder if like, how much is he actually like creeping on them and watching the basketball game?
I don't think he is at all. I think the boys are just telling stories.
I think that's so cute. Yeah.
So I also, the other thing too is we get so many great shots of the building that Sean Connery lives in. It's a much older building than the other ones around it, and you can tell that a lot of the block around it has been torn down over the years, because the back side of it is like, it's okay. Wait, I actually have to back up and explain this for people who are not familiar with New York. The buildings are built so close together that there's always at least one side of a building that is basically just solid brick, like no windows or anything, right? Because that basically was literally attached. And a lot of times the buildings are actually usually braced to each other because they're so close to each other. And so you can tell that this building once had a building that was like right up against one of its walls, and that building is now no longer there. So this is like, they could not have chosen more perfect building for the metaphor of isolation and literally being cut off from the rest of your community. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that's just great about it is it's such like an Edward Hopper building. Like, if you're not familiar with the artist Edward Hopper, look up Edward Hopper paintings. He painted a lot of buildings in New York, and he often, a lot of times, there's some really great ones of buildings where it's almost like he he must have been like on a train passing this building by, and he sees into a window.
Oh, he did Nighthawks.
Yes, he did Nighthawks.
And the Automat. I love the Automat.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was known for doing this kind of mysterious gaze looking in on somebody in what's clearly a very private, alone moment. And there's something about that creates this real sense of isolation and loneliness. And I have to believe that it's intentional, that he picked a building and he shot it in that Van Zandt picked a building and shot it in such a way that it felt like an Edward Hopper painting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Finding Forrester in general is a very painterly movie. Like, I mean, I saw the Hopper influences in it. I also think you could see a lot of, like, Jacob Lawrence vibes. Jacob Lawrence was, like, a Harlem Renaissance painter and kind of did very jazzy sort of paintings of New York City. And I think there's a lot of those vibes there. And I thought that something that was really cool about that is that there were critics who actually kind of called the movie very jazzy, and there is literally jazz music in it. And so Mermelstein, our critic who is writing for Variety, actually wrote an entire...
What a good name.
I know, right? David Mermelstein. He was actually writing about the use of jazz music in this movie, and I thought this was like super interesting. So he starts his article with, somewhat incongruously, the ghosts of Miles Davis and the Wizard of Oz haunt director Gus Van Sant's new film, Finding Forrester. Yet those ghosts are hardly there by chance. Van Sant is an exacting filmmaker who employs music to accentuate and amplify aspects of his films. And something I was actually going to ask you, Belle, while watching Finding Forrester was if you feel like this is like really a New York movie, because I was watching it and I was like, I feel like this is such a New York movie.
So I no, but I just think because I am not really familiar with the parts of New York that like shine in this movie. Like literally, I didn't really, I was like kind of just assuming like generic inner city location until the kid from Forrester's lawyer's office comes by and he makes the joke about, he's like, you're far from Manhattan. Do you think you're going to get back there before dark? And like, it wasn't even until that joke came that I was like, oh, obviously we're in New York. But I just think it's because I don't think I've ever been to the Bronx. And I'm not familiar just with the kind of architecture and the history of that part of the city, that borough. Is it technically a borough?
It is a borough.
Yeah. So... No, but then as soon as it was made clear through the dialogue, I was like, yes, that makes, yes.
Well, I guess actually bringing that up, I mean, for our listeners who aren't from New York and maybe don't know some of the history of the Bronx, and I think that this is kind of like the cutoff building really evoked this for me, but part of the reason why the Bronx has had so many economic challenges is because I believe it was around the mid 20th century, they built a huge highway through it and basically destroyed the neighborhoods. Yeah. And they tore down large amounts of the old buildings. So that's a big part of kind of like what happened there. I mean, but I don't know, one of the things that I really liked about it is that I didn't remember from the first time I saw this was that to me, I was like, this feels like such a New York movie. And I really liked that it was views of New York that you don't normally see in quote-unquote New York movies. But I thought it was interesting to talk about since we were just talking a couple weeks ago about whether or not Cat People is a New Orleans movie or not. So Mermelstein argues that this movie is, quote, one not incidentally set in New York City, and to set that scene, Van Zandt relies largely on jazz and on Miles Davis in particular. And one of the producers of Finding Forrester said, I guess because he being Van Zandt, he felt jazz was the best way to get New York across, to suggest various culture clashes. And another producer said, not all the Davis songs are totally approachable, and I think that works particularly well in this movie with Forrester, the title role played by Sean Connery, not being totally approachable. And Van Zandt specifically drew from Davis's later catalog of music, so kind of the stuff that's maybe not like his most famous or well-known music. And then I brought this article over here because I also wanted to read this because I just thought this was really interesting movie and music history. But Mermelstein writes, Despite Davis's legendary appeal, the use of his music throughout a film is rare. The exceptions are few. He wrote and performed an original score for Louis Malle's 1958 film Elevator to the Gallows, and wrote subsequent scores for Siesta 1987 and Dingo 1992. Otherwise, his music has been used sporadically but evocatively in such films as Lenny and Basquiat.
Oh.
So I actually did not know Miles Davis wrote scores for any movie,
either.
so I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, if you don't know anything about Miles Davis, I highly recommend you start with the album Sketches of Spain. It's iconic and very moody and great. Yeah. So to continue back with going back to that whole, like, Davis as part of, like, you know, emphasizing the unapproachability of this character, we also have this, like, tension between the inside and outside in, like, other fun little metaphors, like the lockers at the private school where Jamal literally can't get the lockers open and Claire comes over and, like, bangs on them with her fist. Yes. And then she says, at least they look good. So I think, again, that emphasizes this idea of appearances versus what something really is internally. And then I think that the whole internal versus external theme really comes to a head in the two key tensions of this movie, which is basketball versus writing, which is like the visible versus the invisible talent.
I feel like I have to put this out there, and I'm so sorry.
Oh no. But
I kept getting get your head in the game from High School Musical stuck in my head every time there was a basketball scene.
Well, that's a real downgrade from Miles Davis.
I know, it really is. But it's an excellent song anyway. But yeah, no. Okay. Because of this, like, you know, basketball or writing, and, like, this is what he's really, like, here for and what he's being pressured about, but, like, this is what he really wants to do, but, like, this is how he fits in, but this is where he excels. I just kept so anyway, my brain went right back to when I was 16 and watching High School Musical all the time, so I apologize.
So going back to, like, this kind of tension between the talent that everybody can see and wants to use Jamal for, which is basketball, versus the writing, which is a much more interior skill. I did also want to talk about the theme of writing and literature in this movie, because it is kind of the whole movie. First of all, I just want to say I loved Forrester's writing lessons. Like, he had this one quote where he says, "You write your first draft with your heart. You rewrite with your head."
Yes. I really loved, I don't know if it's necessarily, I think it's about writing. I don't think it was used in a conversation that was explicitly about writing and literature in the movie, but I think the soup questions are very much a lesson in writing. And it was this moment in the movie where I love all of their conversations, because, like, Jamal's got such an adorable little, like, almost ADHD kind of, like, brain. He's just, like, flicking all over the place with questions and things he wants to talk about and ask Forrester. And in the middle of some random conversation, he says, like, why doesn't our soup foam up like this? And Forrester eventually answers and says it's because his mom probably grew up in a household that didn't waste milk in soup. And he says, that's a really good question.
That's why his soup doesn't thicken or something. Yeah.
Thicken or get a skin or something like that. Yeah. And Forrester's like, no, that's a good question. And I forget why he explains it's a good question.
He explains it's a good question because he says you'll learn something about yourself through the answer.
Exactly. And then that becomes a thing throughout the rest of the movie, is they're like, that's not really a soup question, is it? But I think that's a really great lesson about writing, is that, like, you, through that action, you learn about yourself, whether or not the story you're writing is actually technically about you. And I also really love the concept of the rhythm of typing getting you into the work.
Well, that's one of my other favorite lines, was the first key to writing is to write, not to think.
Yes. And that's, so as a writing educator, that is something I love to teach, and that people are, like, floored when I say that. And it really does work, and I think that's amazing. And I love that it's, I don't know, I feel like it's something you don't see a lot in movies about writing or characters about writing is not that it's like easy, but just how kind of like you just sort of throw yourself in and see what sticks, and then you do the hard work.
Yeah, it's funny. I sometimes find like when I'm struggling with writing that it helps to just get out a notebook and a pen, and like sometimes just the tactile act of like physically trying to write kind of gets it going. And I don't necessarily do that for very long before I switch to my computer, but just long enough to get the juices going.
I like to do timed typing tests online.
I'm not very good at those.
I'm a very fast typer, and so they're just fun. But
you know what? You know what, Belle? Can you type accurately while holding a conversation with eye contact?
No, I cannot do that, but I can type 104 words a minute.
Okay.
But no, I like, there's a lot of them that are just like, they're not even actual like complete sentences. They're just like strings of random words. And that's like the typing test. And they're very random, like totally randomly generated lists of words that you type. And I find that's weirdly good for like getting into that brain space. So anyway, some free writing lessons from Laura and Belle for you.
I also love their whole little argument over whether or not you can start a sentence with a conjunction that turns into them having a conversation where they are clearly starting all their sentences with conjunctions.
With and or but. I wrote, bullshit, you can start a sentence with a conjunction, you fuck, and then, yes, Jamal, yes!
Well, I love when Jamal's like, you did it in your book. And so I want to go...
I'm sorry for calling Sean Connery a fuck. I don't really believe that. Just saying.
I also, one of, I think, the most satisfying scenes when...
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
The teacher is being a dick, and he corrects him because he uses farther.
He says farther instead of
further. I was like, so satisfying. Awesome. So I want to talk about Roger Ebert again while we're on this subject.
Does he say... Can I ask... While we're on the subject of dear old Roger, in the past couple of educational movies we've looked at that he's discussed, a big beef of his is whether or not they dig into the literature enough. Does he have some thoughts about that for this movie?
Belle, let me read this quote to you from Roger Ebert's Finding Forrester review. Okay. So, Roger writes, because we're on a first-name basis now.
Because we're on a first-name basis. We're pals, Roger and us.
Quote, movies about writers are notoriously hard to do, since writing, by its nature, is not cinematic. And fast-forwarding a little bit, he says, quote, the movie Finding Forrester contains at least two insights into writing that are right on target. The first is William's advice to Jamal that he give up waiting for inspiration and just start writing. My own way of phrasing this rule is the muse visits during composition, not before. The other accurate insight is a subtle one. An early shot pans across the books next to Jamal's bed, and we see that his reading tastes are wide, good, and various.
Wide, good, and various.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Title of your section. Sorry, I had to.
Oh my God, Belle.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm not that sorry. Interesting. And because in Dead Poet Society and Educating Rita, he makes such a bug about the fact that they do essentially what is done here, whereas they do a lot of name dropping and not a lot of digging into the stories. And so I'm surprised that this is something he's like, he gives a pass.
Yeah, he seemed to really like this movie.
Fascinating.
So let's talk about one of these New York Times articles that I found.
Oh no. Okay, so who's coming out of timeout?
Stephen Holden, who did not like Easy A last week.
Oh, right. How dare he? That movie's a masterpiece. Can I just... Because you did Easy A by yourself last week and I did not get a chance to contribute, one of my favorite moments and my best friend India's favorite moments from that movie is perpetually the part where, is it Alison Mashaka?
Yeah.
Who plays her best friend goes, woo, big tits! That's it. I'm done.
Great. So Stephen Holden writes, got game and pen and mentor, which I think is the stupidest headline I've ever read. And somehow kind of insulting.
Yeah.
There's something insulting about it, isn't there?
What feels insulting is that an editor looked at that and went, yeah, that's fine.
Good enough.
And wasn't like, what the fuck are you trying? Is this a metaphor? What's going on here?
I know.
Is this a joke?
Like, why is it this long list? Like... And it got game is just like you're writing a got milk ad. It's just icky. And it feels like he's trying to almost write in Jamal's voice, which just feels offensive. I don't like it. Are you ready? By the way, anybody who loves Robin Williams, he's about to get ripped apart in this movie, even though he wasn't in it.
Is he just gonna, okay, God, how much is he gonna, how much does he talk about Dead Poets Society versus this movie in this review of Finding Forrester and not Dead Poets Society?
Well, Belle, quote, first, the good news. Finding Forrester, the latest in a rising tide of shameless male weepies, does not star that leaky human bucket of crocodile tears, Robin Williams, who helped pioneer the genre.
Okay. Ouch. But also, I kind of love the description, linky human bucket of crocodile tears. I'm sorry. That's pretty good. I'll give him that, but that's all I'll give him.
But so, like, that is not fair to Robin Williams.
That's not fair to Robin Williams. I'm weepy. What was the super stupid fragile masculinity thing?
The shameless male weepies.
Shameless male weepies.
Which I feel like goes back to our earlier conversation about how, you know, getting young men interested in reading is a real crisis in this country. And I think one of the coolest things about this movie is that it's about, you know, an older man and a younger man bonding through literature.
I think also it's important is that it's about a handful of, like, young men letting themselves feel things, which is also very important.
Yeah, and aside from the douchey basketball player at the prep school, like, most of the young boys in this movie they're pretty sweet. Like, I really like them.
I love his friend, I forget his first name, but I know his last name is Coleridge, because they make the joke about he couldn't identify the author, who turned out to be Samuel Taylor Coleridge, but I really like him and his whole, like, little tiny brief storyline. I wish there would be more to it. But I think even the jerky basketball player, like, he has his own, not like as a character has merit, but like his storyline I think has merit in the whole, like, he's clearly coming from like his own weird place and needs to sort out his own weird feelings, and right now that's a lot of anger, and it's okay to feel that as long as it's not the only thing. I think it's just, I don't know, I think there's lots of young men facing emotions in this story that are really important, and it's okay for people to cry. Steve.
Ugh. So he feels that there's some merit to, at least it was Connery and not Williams in this movie. He says Mr. Connery is more of a stern, cranky boss than the empathetic mushpot Mr. Williams would have made him.
Okay. And this also, is this one of the critics in your discussion last week about Easy A, basically, who was like saying like this should have been a different movie? Because it sounds like he's just saying this should have been a different movie.
I can't remember anymore. I've blocked it out. I think you will enjoy this description though. It's so over the top.
Is it as good as a human bucket of crocodile tears?
Oh, I think it's actually better. It's better because it uses a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 syllable word. Okay. The star's hawk-like eyes glaring under Mephistophelian brows cast look so imperious they threaten to turn into lightning bolts. Couldn't even make it through that sentence.
I have to look up Mephistophelian. Wicked or fiendish? Mephistopheles is a character?
Yeah. So he did like Sean Connery, but like I feel like that's like, who doesn't?
I wouldn't call his look wicked or fiendish. Not throughout the whole movie. There's some places where he's playful. I agree.
I wouldn't either. I actually would call him dashingly handsome.
Well, yes. There are some moments where he is kind of not playful exactly, but he does have that sort of like, He's got to look like when the kid comes in from Manhattan to give him all of his booze and socks and stuff. He's like making a joke and he's got that sort of twinkly look in his eye, but I wouldn't call it.
He's got that
fiendish.
Indiana Jones's dad look.
Oh shit! Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Okay, Belle. Quote, now for the bad news.
Oh, God.
Finding Forrester is 100% bogus from its high concept characters whose resemblance to real human beings is distant at best to the lessons it imparts on everything from courtship to writing. The director, Gus Van Sant, who, with the far superior Good Will Hunting, staked his claim to being king of the surrogate father-boy genius subgenre, does what he can to gloss over the movie's absurdities. But the screenplay by Mike Rich is so far-fetched and riddled with holes that Mr. Van Zant's urban realist touches only underscore the falseness of what's on the screen. I would say this falls into the category of wanting this movie to be something it's not.
Does he have examples of things that are like so ridiculous and absurd? Like what about this is so unrealistic to him?
Quote, to start with,
oh God,
there's Forrester himself, a literary one-hit wonder who wrote a Catcher in the Rye-like classic several decades ago. He has been holed up ever since in his Bronx apartment, writing alleged masterpieces that he refuses to publish. Why? It has something to do with his paranoid fear of being critically misinterpreted. Actually, that's not. He literally has a whole moment where he realizes that this nurse in the hospital wanted to talk to him about how great his book was instead of his brother who was dying in the next room. And that traumatized him.
I get the impression he didn't finish the movie because he does say
possible.
that kind of early on in the beginning. He gives this sort of what I expect is like the front he puts on when people try to ask him about it. This is sort of like the canned answer he has just ready to go to get people off his back. Where he's like, I wrote a book and people started telling me what it was about and I didn't like that, so I stopped writing books. But then you find out later it's this much deeper thing that's all wrapped up in grief about losing his family. Because I remember hearing that at first and I was like, okay, like, so that every writer goes through that. You write a book and you put it out there, it's not yours anymore. You should know that. But then, of course, we learn it's something different. But it seems like Steve just didn't finish the movie or get past that little speech because what the fuck?
Or Steve should have listened to some of the writing advice and he would have learned how to be a better writer, and then maybe he could write things better than just snarky criticism. Because Steve writes, Forrester's advice to Jamal about how to write is bizarre, to say the least. He instructs the young man to begin an essay with the opening paragraph of something he himself has written, and then to take off from there and let his fingers go where they may in a kind of automatic writing. The advice seems intended to disprove Truman Capote's remark about Jack Kerouac's work, that it's not writing, but typing. Oh, I guess he... Okay.
What the fuck, Steve?
I know. I actually think that it's kind of a brilliant exercise, too. And this is something that I actually, like, if I was going to... Belle and I have both taught writing before. And if I was going to teach writing again, I would do more of. And that's that, you know, I think it's really interesting that plagiarism becomes the key conflict in this movie. Because I think the way we teach plagiarism in schools is so wrong. Like, we basically just try to put the fear of God into students about copying anything, and we don't actually talk to them about how, you know, how writing is a call and response with past writers, and how writing involves illusion and influence and inspiration. And one of the things I thought was incredible when I finally took a poetry workshop with Belle in our graduate year was that, or actually we did this in my undergraduate too, but I don't think I really thought about it as a teacher until we were in grad school, is this idea of like, you actually copy poems and you like try to put your own spin on them, and hopefully through the process of revising you eventually have something that's just completely yours, or it's yours enough but still enough like that person's poem that you just write something like after Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Yeah, exactly. And I think that like that's something that's really missing in nonfiction and longer form fiction writing, is how to use other people who have really mastered the art of writing. How do you use that writing to learn how to write too? And then how do you take it to a point where it's enough your own that, you know, you could enter it into a writing competition? So No, I completely disagree, Stephen. I don't think you know anything about pedagogy.
God, Steve, I this is so many of the conversations I have because I work in academics now, and I work with a lot of students working on academic projects. So many of these conversations I have about writing are like, you are joining a conversation with other writers who have been talking about this for decades or centuries before you have gotten here. So like here, like, and you know, these same conversations like you were saying about plagiarism is like, yes, it's bad, but like what they're worried about is that you're going to buy an essay off of study.com, and what you're doing is writing your own project entirely and just citing stuff, and that's okay. and yeah, the whole I was reminded of being in fiction workshops with Mike Cardos, and when I took Introduction to Creative Writing with Catherine Pierce, they both did this exercise in class where they would pick a random story from a random journal. We would often do it from the Best American Fiction of the year, and they would read the first like 3 or 4 words of the first sentence of a story to the class, and then you had to write the rest of the sentence. You had to complete the sentence, and then we would put them into a little bowl, and the teacher would pull them out and read them, and the class would vote on what they thought was the actual sentence. And 9 times out of 10, it was one of the ones that somebody in the class wrote and not the actual sentence from the story, because just like hearing the words of others can just be such an amazing jumpstart. And there's some rule, I forget who, I think Neil Gaiman actually said it, so I don't know if this is the best person to quote these days, that writers read a lot, and because you read a lot, you are going to be naturally inspired by other people's work. Oh my God, it's okay.
Yeah, well, it gets worse. Stephen doesn't like Jamal's writing anyway. He writes, with their high-minded sentimentality, these drippy little sermons are perhaps half a cut above the inspirational platitudes found on greeting cards. I don't trust any critic who decides to use the big S word, as in sentimentality, because I feel like critics...
What is a movie supposed to be if it's not sentimental?
Yeah, I think critics who say that, like, it's like what you want everything to be like cold, hard realism. Like, there's not allowed to be a little movie magic here and there. And
That's not what we go to the movies for.
No, and I also, and I've seen other people talk about this, but sentimentality is also a very gendered concept, and it feels like, you know, you're either dismissing women or you're dismissing, you know, men who you feel are not being manly enough. And to that point, he also, I can't believe I'm going to defend Robert Crawford, but he also dismisses him as, quote, the effeminate writing teacher, end quote. Which is like such an unnecessary comment, and there's nothing really about him that necessarily comes across as effeminate.
No.
And also, if there was, it doesn't matter.
No. Is it just because he's not Sean Connery? It's just like everybody in this film who's not Sean Connery is effeminate.
Yeah, he's not Sean Connery, so he's a girly man.
I agree, Sean Connery sucks up a lot of the masculinity just in his vicinity. He's a manly dude. I get that. But
yeah, and so I can't help but feel like, and I think also knowing like Gus Van Zant's history with film, like having made Even Cowgirls Get the Blues and My Own Private Idaho, I mean, he's made some of the most important queer movies of like, I think those were both the 90s. So of the 90s. So to dismiss one of his characters as effeminate also almost feels like, is there some like veiled like homophobia in this criticism?
Yeah.
And then he also, like, has this...
Oh, God, Steve, just quit while you're ahead, man.
Okay. He writes, what is one to make of Jamal? This hybrid of the young Michael Jordan and Arthur Rambo, with the temperament of Gandhi, is the new teenage version of an insidious Hollywood fantasy that might be called the perfect Negro. In his latest incarnation, he looks and sounds like a direct descendant of the sort of righteous but gentle black saint embodied by Sidney Poitier in the late 1960s and early 70s. Invoked at a moment when some are alarmed by the language and attitude of contemporary rappers, Jamal is a blatant palliative, a fantasy figure invented to assuage anxiety. Which, I mean, I do think we could go a lot deeper into how race relations are portrayed in this movie, and I'm sure if we did go deeper, it might not be perfect, but I gotta be honest, I read this paragraph and I kind of feel like he just wanted to go, watch how many names I can drop. What's not fair about this criticism is that I think Jamal is a very three-dimensional character, and he's a very dynamic character, and the actor who plays him is incredible and really carries the film for somebody so young. So I think it's very dismissive of a very well-rounded, complex character who's not here to play a trope. And I think the hard thing about this criticism that's dismissing him as a trope is that by not following this up with what he wishes Jamal would be, all you can imagine is that he's asking that Jamal be the opposite of this trope. And the opposite of a trope is just another trope.
I was going to say, it sounds like the opposite of the trope would be like a stereotype, which I'm sure he wouldn't be happy with either. So I would just like to point out, I have a friend who listens to these whose husband's name is Steve. And so I apologize if she's playing this out loud and he keeps getting accosted by the sound of his own name. We're not talking about you, Steve. We're talking about this Steve.
Not Steve. We're saying Steve.
Yeah, exactly.
He does say it is a measure of Mr. Brown's talent that he is able to infuse this impossible role with some heart and carefully softened notes of wounded innocence and righteous indignation. So he gives the movie that much. He calls the screenplay atrocious.
Jesus!
He ends this article with, quote, "But by the time Over the Rainbow bleats over the soundtrack for the second time, it's clear that even the director has succumbed to the mood of gummy, relieved schmaltz."
I love that version of that song. I didn't realize it was that old because it started playing and I was like, I thought this came out when I was in high school.
That's the thing that also really bothered me about that, because it's actually not even really a factual statement, because it's not just Over the Rainbow. It's the version of Over the Rainbow that's mixed with
What a Wonderful World. And when they play it previously, it's a very toned down instrumental version that it took me a few minutes to realize was that song, which I think was kind of the point.
And I think to refute Mr. Holden, I want to go back to our friend Mermelstein, who wrote about the use of music in this film. And I'm also really sorry if I mispronounced this musician's name. But Mermelstein writes, according to Mark, Van Sant's use of Kamakawiwole's version of Rainbow, which was brought to his attention by exec producer King, is just another example of the director upending convention. Yes, Over the Rainbow is sentimental, Mark says, but not the way it's used here. Gus didn't want to go the standard route, so he took the most sentimental song imaginable and used a unique arrangement. Gus has always been fascinated by the slightly odd. End quote.
Yeah.
I think my problem with this review is it really wants to read this movie on the surface level, and it's not giving it credit for the much deeper work that it's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So fuck you, Steve.
But not you. But
Steve,
but
not Steve.
Yeah. I think that's enough of the New York Times.
Yeah. I thought you had two that were in timeout.
I don't even want to do the other one. I'm done.
It just is going to stay in timeout. We're done with it.
So I thought maybe we could end on just I don't know, what are some of your favorite lines and scenes that we haven't talked about yet? And I just also, again, to the bigger point of, I think this is just a beautiful ode to literature. I just read a horrendous statistic recently that said that 16% of Americans read books.
It wasn't like physical books as opposed to ebooks or audio, just books.
I don't know
oh God.
I don't know the details of the survey.
To make that feel a little less awful, I didn't go to my last month's book club meeting, but I was told by everybody who did go that I am friends with that there were so many people and so many new people at this book club meeting. They ran out of chairs. So 16%, a newly refurbished bookstore full of book lovers. You win some, you lose some.
All right. I like that. Yeah. That's hopeful. So maybe we could do, if there's any other favorite lines or scenes, and then some tarot?
Okay, yes. So yes, I love my favorite bit from Forrester in the movie is when he shows up to the school at the end to read at the writing contest. And of course, like, the English teacher and like the faculty know who he is immediately, but the kids don't know until he says his name. And he's like, I'm William Forrester. And there's a sort of like, hush that goes over the crowd. And then they're in the English classroom, which has the wall of paintings of famous authors throughout history on the wall behind the where everybody's sitting. And so he says, I'm William Forrester. And he puts on his glasses and he looks up at the wall and he goes, I'm that one. And he points to his portrait. I love it.
That's a good moment. I love, there's a line where when Claire says to Jamal, you get an education and they get what they want. Or maybe you both get what you want.
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
I thought that was such a great, like, distilling of the power dynamics at play in this movie. And also, my favorite scene, this is like one of the only scenes that I could even clearly remember from the last time I saw this movie, but I freaking love the BMW scene.
Yes! Okay, you talk about that a bit, and then I'll come back with the thing that I love that's related to the BMW scene.
Jamal, before he's met Forrester, he's out on the court, he sees a BMW pull up to Forrester's, and this very harried guy gets out, and he's got all of these goods that he's bringing up to Forrester that he's getting out of his trunk, and he locks the car twice or something like that, and Jamal's kind of making fun of him.
This would have been in a very, like, a time when the way that you lock the car, like, this was sort of novel and only on expensive cars where you would hit the button, it would go chirp chirp.
Oh, I didn't know that about that. Okay, because Jamal ends up kind of making fun of him, like, oh, what, you're, like, scared of me or whatever? And the guy's, like, clearly scared of him and being a total asshole. And so Jamal ends up giving him, like, and the guy acts really snobby, like, oh, it's not you, it's not personal, it's just, this is a BMW. You probably don't know what a BMW is or whatever. And Jamal ends up giving him this entire history of how the company BMW started making plane engines for the Nazis. And then after World War II, when they were told you can't make plane engines anymore, they started making cars. And that the little white and blue logo that they have is supposed to be like what, like propellers, a plane propeller on a blue sky. So he totally schools this guy in, like,
his own vehicle,
and basically points out to him that he's driving a fascist mobile. So I love that. And then I also love, and I have to believe this is intentional, but not too long after this.
Yes, okay, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, it's gotta be intentional. So I think Forrester must have been watching them and, like, listening.
Well, no, wait, not that. There's another thing before that where Jamal gets picked up in a car by the guy from the prep school, and the car that guy drives is a Mercedes, which is also a German car company. And I mean, my knowledge of this might purely be coming from Indiana Jones movies, but don't the Nazis drive Mercedes?
What I was going to bring up is shortly after that, once Jamal and Forrester get to know each other well, and Jamal's, like, actually hanging at his apartment, the BMW guy comes back to drop stuff off, and then he turns around and realizes Jamal's there, and he's like, oh, sorry, I didn't know you had company. And Forrester goes, oh, no worries, we were just discussing the intricacies of German automotive history. Like, he was clearly listening or, like, watching on his camera. Jamal actually absolutely schooled this guy.
I think that's also one of my favorite things. Like, actually, in defense of Jamal's character and why I think he's such a strong, interesting character, is he's got this, like, photographic memory for literature and history. And I think that just makes him so... I mean, I personally am a sucker for the surprising genius trope in movies, and I think Jamal does it really well. So it's one of the things I really love about this movie. And on that note, Belle, do you want to take us out with a little tarot? Tarot.
Yes. So I think I want to do one for Jamal and for Forrester. And I think I'm going to go a little bit on the nose, because I think a best suited one for Forrester is the hermit.
Yup.
But not just because of like the meaning of like being isolated, but because like something that is very iconic about the hermit, as if you're looking at like a card, a deck that is traditionally illustrated, he carries this lantern, and that's supposed to represent like truth and knowledge. And so it's not just that he's like, the hermit is secluded or isolated, but it's like a decision to be secluded or isolated in the name of the pursuit of truth or knowledge, which I think kind of fits for Forrester. I think maybe it's not so much that he is the hermit, but that he wants to be. Like, we talked before about, or I mentioned before, like the sort of canned answer he has when people ask, why didn't you write again? And he has this sort of like silly egotistical thing right on the tip of his tongue, and he's like, I want to be able to write just for the joy of writing and not for commercialism. Like, he thinks he wants to present himself as this noble pursuit of knowledge character, but in actuality he is isolating himself because he's very hurt and he's scared.
Well, and I think, though, using the word truth is interesting, because I think a lot of Forrester's reclusivity also comes from a desire to find some sort of integrity that he just feels he can't maintain out in the world. And there's like a truth, I think, even though it is a light shining out into the darkness, I think a lot of times the pursuit of truth is ultimately internal. And so I feel like that goes right back to like the whole theme that we started off with. It's like the interiority versus the exteriority in Finding Forrester.
Mm-hmm. And then for Jamal, I think my first intention was something like the magician, maybe, represented like somebody at the beginning of a journey who has all the tools to be able to pursue anything, which I do think fits a little well. And then I also thought like, the Page of Wands could work because it's a similar sort of thing of like somebody who is like an apprentice and just starting to learn, and wands are creative. But I think what suits him best perhaps is to kind of also go along with Forrester, the Page of Swords. And so it's not just that he has this opportunity to embark on like a creative endeavor, but he has the opportunity to embark on an endeavor to gain knowledge and perspective and truth and understanding in all aspects of his life, not just in writing. Writing is like the tool that he might use to parse and understand those things, but he is really beginning like a journey of his own mind and how he understands the world around him. And I think that fits really well with the Page of Swords.
I love that. So everybody should hold up their lanterns of truth to the darkness of our times and go forth and look for your magic.
Yeah. I will. I think we need to have an honorable mention for at what is probably actually my favorite moment of the movie, which is Sean Connery riding around the Bronx in the middle of the night on a bicycle.
Yes, it's such a good, I will speak about talking about like the lantern in the darkness kind of moment. It's such this moment of pure joy.
Yeah, and he's dressed very brightly as well, and so he really stands out in the darkness. Yeah.
And I love the detail too that he's on these completely empty streets late at night, but he still has to follow the rules and do the hand signals.
You can find your Silver Nitrate Witches on various online... What are you doing?
Seeing if I can, for like a third time in a row, mess you up.
She succeeded. Okay. You can find your Silver Nitrate Witches on various online platforms at LJ Valenza and at Bellang303. Thanks so much to Fine Motor for the use of their songs Highway Moon and Movie. You can check out more about the band at finemotormusic.com. Thanks for listening. Stay witchy and keep watching movies. Were you actually not doing anything? Because I was specifically staring into the middle distance to avoid looking at the camera.
No, I did more goofy things while you weren't looking.